So thank you everybody for coming. Welcome to Faith Communities Go Green Zoom event. Faith Communities Go Green is committed to working together with all faith communities in the tri-state area so that we can all become better stewards of our natural world. When we began a year ago, we looked at models of similar faith nonprofit environmental organizations, and we found that the most successful organizations had in their membership houses of worship that had green teams. So under C.J. Willie's guidance, we are going to learn tonight how to start a green team in our houses of worship. C.J. is the director of Earth Connection. She served 2 terms of office as the NGO representative at the United Nations for the Sisters of Charity Federation. And she continues to work with microfinancing projects in Africa. We are so fortunate to have CJ on our team. Please welcome CJ. And you get to unmute, and I will mute myself.
All right. Thank you, Joanne. And thank you to each of you for joining us this evening. We welcome your questions at the end of the presentations, but feel free to put them in the chat at any time while you're thinking of them. Our first speaker is going to be Doug Bell, and Doug is chair of the Cincinnati chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, which is an organization of volunteers working to get the federal government to enact a carbon fee and dividend to address global warming. He has served as a sustainability advisor to his church's trustee, who are implementing several green projects. And he's also the Western Ohio Conference of the United Methodist Church. As part of his conference work, he organized a seminar on energy efficiency attended by over 15 local churches. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, so should be a PowerPoint. There we go. There we go. And let me exit full screen so I can see my notes. All right. Yeah, so where do we go from here? First of all, pretty much every denomination somewhere on their website has a guide on how churches can be more sustainable and more environmental. And I'm not going to talk about that too much. I would say go to the experts. I'm going to talk more about almost the political aspects of forming a green team, of how you go about finding the right people and making sure you have the right influence. So where do we go from here? A lot of the answer depends on your situation, but here are some pointers. The first thing you need to do is get support from others in your house of worship. Find some allies in your house of worship. The more people involved in a project, the more credibility it will have. Also, your allies will give you feedback on what others are thinking or saying. So how do you find the allies? Look for other green initiatives in your house of worship. Is someone already running a recycling program? Is someone already composting kitchen scraps? Do they have sustainable landscaping, and who made that decision? Excuse me. Another thing to look for is someone active in other environmental organizations like the Sierra Club or Green Umbrella or Citizens Climate Lobby. Have they shown environmental interest in their personal life? For instance, have they bought an electric vehicle? Did they put solar panels on their roof? Also, youth groups are very enthusiastic and very persuasive, and the young people are very green oriented. So those are 4 ways for your first step. Find some allies. The next thing you do, number 2, is form your team. Even if your first meeting is just 2 people. You just don't want to be real isolated in this instance. And the more people you have, the more credibility you're going to have. And 2 people have more credibility than just 1. There are several sources of helpful instructions on how to form a green team. initiate some sustainability projects and get the work done. As I was talking before, but Interfaith Power and Light, Green Faith, and nearly every denomination has instructions, and some of them are 8 pages long and some of them are 50 pages long. I look around at all of them and find the best one for you, but for me, Interfaith Power and Light's a pretty good place to start, and then maybe your denomination or your religion. The third thing, determine who the decision makers are. Don't be a bull in the china shop, find the lay of the land first. And it's interesting, the decision maker is not always the most obvious person with the title. Volunteer organizations are sometimes like pirate ships. The decisions are often made by informal consensus or a group of people hiding below the deck. So you just need to be aware of that. There are formal decision makers and there are informal decision makers, and they're equally important. Be sure to get agreement by your facilities committee before going too far. Green team needs to get their buy-in early. If you don't get the green light early on, some of them may feel you're stepping on their turf. Frankly, I did that at my church. When I first started, I was working with the facilities manager, and we're doing some recycling and putting in new light bulbs. And the trustees committee, who in my church is in charge of the building and the parking lot and all the physical infrastructure, I got some pretty sharp pushback, and I learned my lesson on that. So, find out who's in charge of the building before you decide to make any changes to it. Also, be sure the paid staff agrees, but please keep in mind they're already very busy. They probably don't need another thing on their plate, but you need to make sure that they buy in and they agree and that they support you with the limited amount of time that they have. The fourth thing, don't assume everyone will quickly get on board with your proposals. Sustainability is a great idea. Most people agree, but not everybody's going to. For one, some may be politically conservative. They may not believe in climate change. They may still love their coal. And, you just need to be sensitive to how they feel. And secondly, they may be worried that your project will take resources and money away from their project. Let's say they want to run a major fundraiser for the youth group. Well, if you're running a fundraiser for yours, or you're creating a team, you might steal some resources from their pet project. And that's a legitimate concern. No one's going to say that our project is more important than someone else's. And just try not to step on too many people's toes, and just be aware that if you get that pushback, it's legitimate. Whatever they're working on, that's important to them. Thirdly, they just may not want to be bothered. A lot of people are already volunteering in other areas of the church, or they're volunteering outside of the church, or they working 70 hours a week at their job, or they're pretty happy in a slow retirement and they just may not want to be bothered. The fourth thing is that, especially with energy efficiency, which is in my forte, things like heating and air conditioning inefficiency, it's out of sight, out of mind. All the furnace and all that duct work, it's behind the walls and nobody sees it. And sometimes it's hard to get people excited about things like that. The fifth thing, an energy audit is a great place to start when determining what to work on first. The Green Umbrella organization can be a big help with that. There are 3 types of audits. I won't go into ASHRAE, that's another term, but you can get just a walkthrough. You can get something a little bit more thorough, or you can have someone come in, and it's going to take a couple of days, depending on your building. But an energy audit will help you set your priorities. So how do you set your priorities? Is it return on investment? Is it payback period? Is it greenhouse gas reduction? Is it overall sustainability? And after you get that audit, those are decisions that your committee is going to have to make. Show the decision makers the return on investment and payback period of the various improvements. Be sure to use the word improvements. In fact, if you get a good energy audit, that's all going to be laid out. For example, it'll say, change these light bulbs in the fellowship hall. Your return on investment is going to be $800 a year, and it will pay for itself in 4 years. Here's one of my favorite things is when you're presenting this to a committee or to the trustees or to the staff to get approval to start work, tell them, remember, any money you're not sending to the utilities is money you can spend on outreach and mission work. It's very persuasive. Any money that you don't send to the utilities is money you can spend on outreach and mission work. And 6, my advice, I would start with the low-hanging fruit with a good return on investment. It's almost always light bulbs. To go from incandescent to LEDs, typically the payback period is 3 years. After 3 years, it's paying for itself, and you've got gravy to spend on other mission work. If no low-hanging fruit exists, start with an easy win. And sometimes it doesn't really even matter what it is. But getting that easy win, that low-hanging fruit with a great return on investment, is going to give your team momentum, visibility, and credibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doug. Some very good information for each of us. When we were putting this webinar together, we sent a letter to the 33 people who had answered a survey we had sent out to multiple congregations earlier in the year. And we asked for those who already had started green teams if people would be willing to share their expertise. And so the people who will be speaking now are those who have already started green teams and are working with them in their congregations. We asked them 3 questions. The first question we asked is, what are the steps your congregation took to start your green team? And our first speaker is going to be Joanne Gerson from the Rockdale Temple. And Joanne is also the co-chair of the Faith Communities Go Green Impact Team for Green Umbrella. Joanne?
Thank you, CJ. And in the chat is a list of all of the congregations that have responded to the survey. So later in the presentation, you'll want to study that list. So when Rabbi Karan, Rockdale Temple's rabbi of blessed memory, scheduled the first ever Mitzvah Palooza event, mitzvah being good deed and a palooza, fun event in 2009, there were various actions in the announcement to choose from, all worthy acts of kindness or mitzvah. However, there were no environmental actions listed. And I asked the rabbi about that, and she said, no one volunteered to organize an environmental event. So I raised my hand and I volunteered. Oh, but I had no idea what I was getting into, what level of environmental interest existed in our congregation. So instead of a mitzvah action, I created a challenge, a Jeopardy-style environmental game with a prize for the winner. And on the day of the Mitzvah Palooza event, 12 people showed up to play. At the end of the game, I asked if the 12 would be interested in meeting again to talk about what we can do at Rockdale. And they all said absolutely. The result was a new committee, Rockdale Temple Environmental Committee, and it's still going strong today. This was a fun and spontaneous way to find like-minded people that are excited to work together to help others become better stewards of our natural world. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Our second speaker is Susan Vogt from St. Francis de Sales Parish in Cincinnati. And she is also one of the leaders here in Cincinnati for the Pachamama Alliance and has worked with the Marianas Lake community for many years. Susan?
Thanks. Yes, I am a member of St. Francis de Sales Catholic Parish. So that would be my official Green Team place. However, that's not how I got started myself. What happened about 10 years ago, I found out about the Pachamama Alliance, which is an international organization based in California. And they were offering these symposiums, and their goals were environmental sustainability, social justice, and spiritual fulfillment. So that really fit things I cared about. And so my husband and I decided to learn how to offer the symposiums that they do called Awakening the Dreamer. And that's where we really started. We were giving these symposiums not only in Catholic churches, but other Christian churches, other faith communities, or anybody who would listen, environmental groups that cared about the same things we cared about. And then eventually, well, since several of the people in our team of presenters belonged to the St. Francis de Sales Parish, we ended up often being the host facility for it. And so it sort of grew out of, it started growing in our parish also. I think that fits with what Doug was saying in the beginning of find a few environmentally committed people, because that's what we were, and we were looking for other folks who cared about the same kind of things. Now, this was all happening before COVID and the pandemic came online. So we were giving a lot of in-person 3-hour presentations that were in, it wasn't just presentation, they involved people too, in small groups and in interaction. But in hindsight, what I'd say was the key thing in helping us get started is that these educational programs raised consciousness. And once people became aware of the whole elaborate areas that they could get involved in environmental sustainability and social justice, and it all fit with their faith too, that made them ready to start taking local actions. So I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Susan. The third speaker I have is Pat Timm, but I'm not sure if she's on the call. Is there someone else representing Mount Auburn Presbyterian Church? Okay, if not, we'll go on, and if Pat joins us, we'll come back to her. Our next speaker then is Ann Cooper from Congregation Beth Adam. Ann?
Hi, thank you, CJ. So at Congregation Beth Adam, our green team is focused around climate change, although we cover a lot of the same ground as these other green teams. Our team is relatively new, has just been formed in the last couple of years, and it's part of a larger social justice initiative. So just for a little background, Congregation Beth Adam is an independent liberal Jewish congregation located in Loveland, Ohio. And for a long time, we have been involved in various social action initiatives, things like working with our local food pantry and soup kitchen. And a little over 3 years ago, a group of us began meeting because we wanted to go deeper on some social justice issues and to try and make a difference on a more systemic level with what we see as some of the most critical issues facing society right now. So we spent several months organizing our social justice committee and figuring out the structure of that and how it would function and how we would choose which issues to focus on, recognizing that we couldn't possibly tackle every issue that we were passionate about. And so once we formed that committee and we wrote a charter for it and got approval from our board, as Doug was talking about, then we began to meet with broader membership of the congregation to kind of gauge people's interest in different topics and to see what we might have a critical level of support for. There were wide-ranging issues from immigration to voting rights, inequality, and many others. But one that emerged right at the top was climate change, because people realized what a far-reaching issue it is and how it ties in with so many other issues of justice, equality, poverty, food insecurity, and so on. So we saw it as a root cause issue, where if we do not do something about this, there are a cascade of other effects that follow. So in the end, climate was one of two issues that we chose to focus on for at least the next several years in our Social Justice Committee. And then from within that group, and then bringing in other interested members, we formed our climate team and began to plan our initiatives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Our next speaker is Rita Pritchard from Bellarmine Chapel at Xavier University. Rita?
Thank you. So we have a social mission director, and our Healthy Earth team was basically in a response to Pope Francis's Laudato Si, his book that was released. We were all parts of a reading group of a large parish workshop that was held. And so Timm just kind of started having one-on-one conversations using his community organizing methods with potential members to solicit their values and interests in the topic. So once he had like a core group of people that, you know, were interested in this, they began by brainstorming large ideas for action and organizing them into the pillars of the St. Francis Pledge, which was pray, live, and advocate, which at that time was our structure, but we kind of developed our own structure over time. Basically, we are a team of parishioners that help other parishioners become aware of climate change and the environment and how they can help. We've also just kind of spanned out into helping our neighbors in the community, which Laurie will talk a little bit more about that. But we focus a lot on climate change and, you know, fresh is better, and helping our neighbors, you know, getting green food. So it just kind of, and a lot of what Doug said is kind of what we followed. We went to our pastor, we, you know, did the one-on-one with people that were interested, and we've just kind of been, I think we've been around about 6 or 7 years now. And we're helping make parishioners aware of what's going on with climate change and how they can make a difference. So thank you.
Thank you, Rita. The second question that we asked congregations was, what initiatives have your green teams taken so far? So I'd like to begin with Joanne from Rockdale Temple.
Oh, thank you, CJ. Well, our new group's first action in 2009 was to fix the old commercial dishwasher in the kitchen. Our rabbi found out that the Maisonette restaurant, you remember that restaurant, was auctioning off all their old dishes, flatware, and glasses. And she went there to the auction and she bought them all. And so we no longer serve on paper or plastic at temple events. Voila, we are super classy. Next, we created a recycling program. The temple had contracted with a waste management company that did not pick up recyclables. One of our committee members, an attorney, helped the temple withdraw from the contract and set up a new system with Rumpke in collaboration with the JCC. Rockdale is connected to the JCC. And so temple staff made that work, made it happen. And then as a bonus in 2010, we received the Hamilton County Recycling Award, their first religious organization to receive an award. We had a green team challenge, asking everybody to list, to participate in, and to do 12 things, good stewards of actions at home. One of our members created a quilt that was hung in the temple, a 6-foot tall quilt with a tree with something that went up the tree showing how many people participated in it. And in a year, over 50% of the people participated. The third year, we arranged for an energy audit. It was funded through a grant. These grants are still available through EPA. The temple board then raised funds to retrofit the building with LED fixtures, motion sensors in the restrooms, and temperature controls for rooms not being used during the week, all per recommendations of the audit. And a committee member, an organic farmer, volunteered to grow vegetable plants from seed for us to give to school children on their last day of class. We've done this in some variation every year since 2009. This year, our focus is on collaborating with other temple committees. The result? The Finance Committee is divesting from fossil fuels. The Adult Education Committee hosted a speaker to explain the COP26 conference in Glasgow. That was 2 weeks ago. The book club is reading the environmental book, Braiding Sweetgrass. The women's group is hosting 4 Israeli vegetarian cooking classes online this week. And we are going to be working with Groundworks and Mill Creek Alliance to plant willow stems to stabilize the Mill Creek banks. And last, we are working with Sierra Club to get people out in nature, to appreciate nature by going camping for a family camping weekend. We have also a more adventurous backpacking in the wilderness. Sierra Club instructors are going to teach the skills needed for safe and fun camping adventures. Since 2009, we have provided educational programs, written articles, had speakers, organized actions that offer tools for individuals to live more sustainably. Back to you, CJ.
Thank you, Joanne. Susan from St. Francis de Sales.
Okay. Wow, Joanne, I'm impressed. I'm feeling we're really doing baby steps where we are compared to where you are. But in terms of what actions we have taken, there were several directions we could take. One would be the facility-based action, like putting solar panel on our roof of the church. Well, that was pretty impossible because we have a very old Gothic, high steepled church that just couldn't take solar panels, or at least we didn't know how to do it. So the approach that we took was back in the old days, you know, before COVID started, when we were all getting together for social gatherings where we would eat and we would have, you know, meetings, and there would usually be food around. Well, what we did in our parish at St. Francis de Sales is that we focused on these personal, social, worship type gatherings that involved food. And of course, we had Lenten potlucks and socials. And one of the very practical, there's just some very basic practical things we started with, is that we used to have, you know, bottled water for people for the refreshments. Well, we bought a water dispenser so that we could put it in cups that were not disposable. We encouraged people to bring their own silverware or cups. And so I have one thing, this is my little purse that I take everywhere with me. And I just slip in here something, a spork, a little plastic thing that's a spoon, a fork, and a knife all in one piece. Now, most people don't have that where they carry it in their purse all the time. But the idea was, how can we avoid plastic silverware that has to just be disposed or thrown away? And so we were encouraging people to bring their own, or we would have, because we have a cafeteria connected with it, we just use the silverware and wash it. One of the things that really helped on our Lenten potlucks is that we would have washable plates, like Joanne referred to, things that weren't single use. And one of the volunteers just took all of the cups and plates home with her, put them in her dishwasher, and then brought them back for the next time. I guess she probably had to do 2 or 3 loads. But the idea was, let's avoid single-use plastics, because traditionally they would be so convenient and you just throw them away after you use them one time. But we had a little bit of problem with the fish fries that because the fish fries would bring a lot of people into the parish school in the cafeteria, and we couldn't wash all those plates. So one of the things, we had larger crowds and it was not in a place that was used to that, but they had trash and recycling bins because we had said we need to have recycling bins. However, we started noticing people weren't using them that way. They would just throw their stuff, you know, arbitrarily in either bin, both. And so in what we have learned for the future, I think, is the next solution we're going to try to implement is to ask a volunteer to be, for these large events where people are eating, is to just put them near the recycling bins and the trash bins and sort of guide people to the appropriate bin for what they're throwing away. It's more of the human touch. And so it's more of a process of educating people to change their habits and to start to pay attention and raising consciousness. And all of this happened because of our initial educational programs where we tried to raise people's consciousness. Back to you.
Thank you, Susan. And I see Pat has joined us. I'm delighted. And so Pat, if you would go back to the first question where we asked, what were the steps you took to form your parish green team? Because I know Mount Auburn has a really active green team, and I think everyone would profit from hearing how you got started. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I'm not in my home. I'm in Tennessee, and I didn't know there was an hour difference.
Well, we're glad you're here.
So I was all ready, and I am glad I'm here too, but I do apologize. So 10 years ago, the Mount Auburn team got started, and the very first thing we did was to have some adult forums where we first considered the urgency and the moral obligation to reduce our fossil fuel dependency. And we did that a couple times a year for a couple years. And then we asked ourselves, could sustainability be our congregation's approach to decisions and an expression of our spiritual journey? And it was by asking that question that we began to move forward and have the momentum to. The next thing we did was to look at the certification program of the Presbyterian Church USA to see what they were saying green teams could do. And they have a program in which they encourage us to organize around faith, around buildings and grounds, around green living and green learning. So we looked at that program and we developed a very comprehensive long-range plan for addressing the needs to reduce the carbon footprint. And we went to session, which is the governing body of the Presbyterian Church, and we asked them whether they could support our proposed plan, which included work in these 4 areas that I've just said. And session supported our proposal unanimously, and we formed the Green Leadership Team. And we made a moral and a financial commitment to reduce our carbon footprint. So that's how we got started.
Okay, and Pat, you want to just go right on because I'm right at your name again for some of the initiatives that your green team has taken.
Thank you so much. I made notes to myself of 7 of the initiatives we've taken. And the first one was to have outings, to take people in our congregation on outings that help them see the possibilities of really connecting with nature, with the spiritual opportunities of connecting with earth care. And we went to Fernald, we went to Oxbow, we went to Fort Ancient. We had all-day programs at those places. And that just kind of built fellowship as well as as understanding and commitment to, and we've continued to have outings for 10 years, and they're a very popular program of the church. Second, we really decided to look at worship and how green worship could change us and our life as a congregation. And we decided initially to celebrate green earth care on Earth Day, on the equinoxes, and on the solstice celebrations, so that at least 4 times a year we would really be focused in our worship on earth care. Next, the Buildings and Grounds Committee went to work, and they did the energy audit. They replaced the light bulbs, they replaced the windows, and we have several hundred solar panels on our building. After that, we started a program with the finance committee of the church, and began a program that we call Investing in a Just Future. And through that program, we secured the financing for the solar panels. And if others want to talk with us in more detail about how we developed the solar panel program and how we secured the financing, we'd be happy to share that. In addition, then we had 2 or 3 movie nights a year where we invited our congregation and other congregations that were looking at earth care, and to a movie night with popcorn. And sometimes there were as many as 40 or 50 people who joined us. We also, and I thought this was one of the most important things we did, we had a weekend retreat at Houston Woods, and 80 people from our congregation, which is more than half of our members, joined us for the weekend for workshops, for looking at food policy, for looking at carbon footprints, and to have fun together. And I think that was a really, it made us feel like earth care was a part of the whole congregation, that everyone was engaged in it. And finally, and it came out of that retreat, we did a series of, for 8 months, we studied becoming carbon neutral on a 1 night a month class with a very capable member of our congregation helping us make the choices, helping us see the choices we could make in our households for becoming carbon neutral. And out of that class, we are now preparing to publish a book.
Hey, thank you, Pat, for that very rich input.
Yeah.
Anne from Congregation Beth Adam.
Thank you. Yeah, wow, Pat, I'm just in awe of everything that you just talked about. So I don't know if I can follow that, but keeping in mind that our team is comparatively in its infancy. So we have identified 4 key areas of action that are pretty broad. And as we've developed, we haven't been able to do everything that we've wanted to, but we are starting to do more and more over time. So
you just went mute, and there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So the first area of action that we identified, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're kind of going in and out.
Okay, everyone is freezing for me.
Okay, we can hear you now.
I'm gonna keep talking and hopefully.
Maybe just try turning off your camera. Maybe that'll help the connection.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, Zoom just quit and then popped back up. So here we are. So the first area our team identified was education for adults and children in our congregation. So for adults, we've brought in speakers, we've held film screenings and discussions and book discussions. And we've done these in person pre-COVID and then over Zoom and now in a hybrid approach. And then for the children in our congregation, we have been working to make care for the earth and nature a centerpiece of our religious education. So we've been moving towards more and more outdoor education, which with COVID still going on has the added benefit of being kind of a safer environment as well, and as well as promoting a love of nature. And actually in the next year, we'll be building a new outdoor education area at our congregation. So our goal was from the youngest ages up to make it clear that a central value of our congregation is care for our planet, and then to give people tools and ideas for how to take action. And then the second area is reducing our carbon footprint for our congregation and for our households. And even though that's sort of a drop in the bucket where climate change is concerned, we felt like it was really important to set that example and live by our values. So we've been working on spreading the word among our members about steps they can take at home. And we're pursuing ways to reduce our carbon footprint for our building, such as buying green energy. Then our third area of action is lobbying for policy changes. And on that front, our congregation, through the work of our climate team, endorsed the Carbon Fee and Dividend Act, which the Citizens Climate Lobby has been working tirelessly to promote. And then in Ohio, we supported the repeal of HB 6, the coal and nuclear bailout bill that you've probably all heard about. And it honestly has been a little frustrating to work on this on the Ohio front because the climate has been very difficult in the Ohio legislature, but we continue to try to do that and contact our legislators. And then our fourth goal was to connect with other congregations and community groups and to be a part of a coalition doing this work because we're more powerful together. And so that is exactly what's happening here with Faith Communities Go Green, and we're really thrilled to be a part of it.
Right. Thank you, Anne. And our final speaker on this topic is Laurie Roche, who will be representing Bellarmine Chapel. And Laurie is currently the co-chair of the Healthy Earth team at Bellarmine, where she has been involved for about 6 years. Laurie?
Hi, everyone. I do have some slides. Are you going to share those, Claire? Here we go. I had a lot of pretty pictures, so I wanted to share them. You can go to the next slide, Claire. So as Rita said, our team formed about 6 years ago, and these slides will show you our basic way we've organized ourselves. We do have, since we're on the Xavier University campus, we have limited autonomy as to how much we can do to reduce our carbon footprint on our own. But we've done pretty much all that we can. We are scheduling a walkthrough this spring, but we were recognized as one of 13 parishes by the Archdiocese as a Laudato Si parish. And as Rita mentioned, Laudato Si is the encyclical that Pope Francis wrote, I believe in 2000 and, well, I don't know, several years ago on climate change. We did do the LED lighting thing. Our recycling program is sort of temporarily suspended for practical reasons. We do not have fancy tableware like Rockdale, but we do have reusable tableware for events. Electric cart we use to get around campus, and we're also starting to compost since we have a facility to do that at our Nexus Gardens on the campus. I'll talk more about that later. Next slide, please, Claire. So the next area that we focus on is education and faith formation. And as like Pat said, and the others of you have said, it's very important. This is really the heart of our mission to help people tie their faith to ecological justice, to ecological change. And we sort of practice an integral ecology. So we recognize that it's not just the environment, but it's all connected. Politics, our neighbors, our culture, our faith is all an interconnected, woven effort in which we can advance on our spiritual journey. So like many of the rest of you, we have a combination of things using social media, using our website, using prayers at our masses. We have an annual Earth Day Mass where we have special prayers and give out seeds and other things after the Mass. All of these green actions in our e-bulletin that people can take every month. We've had book groups. So many of these same things that you've been doing, all efforts to educate people, to help them make the lifestyle changes they need to make. So yes, next slide. We have a number of, we also organize for advocacy and partnerships. And like some of the rest of you said, we have taken advocacy actions with our legislators, state legislators, which is usually a long slog. We do have student interns that Xavier has provided to us who help us with a lot of our gardening work that I'll go on in a minute. And we're connected with a climate change work group at the campus and with the other organizations that are working on environmental issues. Next slide. So kind of the heart of our work are projects in Evanston. This goes back to the integral ecology because we do see food justice and work with our neighbors as part of our work on the green team, on the Healthy Earth team. So we have a project in Evanston where Xavier is located. We put garden beds into people's homes. Evanston is something of a food desert. We've put in over 80 beds, raised beds in people's yards who want them. We also do pollinator gardens at the Evanston Recreation Center. And on the Xavier campus, Bellarmine has taken over management of a large community garden and added to it with an urban farm that is a Black-owned business that we're helping support. And a lot of those, the food that's produced goes to local food pantries. We also have, there was a community garden in Evanston, a large community garden that had sort of fallen on hard times, and we have restored that and are gardening there. We volunteer in Evanston on beautification, picking up trash, cleaning out vacant lots, working in their parks. And then we've started last year active discipleship days and usually have 100 to 120 participants in that who are not only working in the gardens and the Evanston beautification, but other initiatives in the community. And then pre-COVID, we would have meatless meetups where we would people would gather at a vegetarian restaurant for a meal together and take some field trips to some places, but COVID kind of put the damper on that. And then the last slide. So upcoming, as part of Laudato Si, the Vatican is asking for institutions of all kinds, not only parishes, but schools and universities and all kinds of Catholic institutions to develop action plans that would be taking place over 7 years and have a lot of measurable objectives. So we are, the Healthy Earth team at Bellarmine will be in charge of facilitating that. And we will be starting to form and work on that plan in the coming months. This is two volunteers of our gardeners who are at a local food pantry. And the other picture is the community garden that we restored.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you.
Lots of wonderful ideas. The third question that we asked our participants was, what advice would you give to those interested in forming green teams if they don't already have one? So we'll start with you, Joanne.
Okay. Well, I hope everybody here has the sense that green teams can really accomplish a lot. Like Doug said, if you have at least another person with you, you can move mountains. So after studying research by Yale, Duke, George Mason Universities, and the publications from United Nations, leaders of our Faith Community Go Green team concluded that the faith community is the best place to address the climate crisis and to stop environmental injustices. All faith traditions approach problems from a moral and ethical perspective. So the moral question is, will the next generation inherit a world that is better or as good as the one that we live in today. Use your religious platform to make changes in your house of worship. You can find like-minded people who would join you to form a green team. Call it what you want, green team, earth care, environmental committee, whatever. Just do not operate alone in a silo. Doug and all the others here have listed several ways to find people that will join you. And that's all you need to begin. Once you have your team, start with easy, achievable actions, and then build on your team's success. Define your purpose, set a goal, develop a strategy, get buy-in from staff, from the board of directors, and from the religious leaders. Stay hopeful and have fun. When appropriate, please share your events and your work with all of us at Faith Communities Go Green so that we can expand the power of your effort together. And I'm going to take a sentence, CJ, to remind people, if you think of questions to ask as this is going on, to please put them in the chat so that they're posted, so that Geneva is going to be helping us with formulating, combining questions that are similar and that sort of thing. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Joanne. Susan?
There, I'm unmuted. Okay, so advice. I'd say remember. At least that's my trick to trying to remember REM. That the R stands for recruit others. That's find a friend, find folks to work with. The E is for education and inspiration. Why are we doing this? You know, why does it make a difference? Why bother? And the education part, I think for faith communities, it's just a very natural starting point is thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not kill other people by having an environment that is not life-sustaining. Thou shalt not kill animals or the earth with, you know, climate change. So it all fits very much with a faith commitment. Of course, in the Catholic tradition, we work very closely following Laudato Si as a framework. And I mentioned earlier that I'm involved with the Pachamama Alliance, and we gave educational programs through that. But since we haven't been doing that in person recently, the solution, of course, is the internet. And most of the Pachamama symposiums are now online. And so that can be a way to educate. And the simplest way I found, and we are just going to start this in our own parish, I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier, is that good old bulletin announcements. And for years, I've been sending parishes short 2-sentence bulletin announcements on marriage moments and parenting pointers. And then I thought, well, why not do that for the environment too? One little tip a week, a 2-sentence thing, a 1-sentence thing that somebody could do as a consciousness raiser and reminder. So I thought of that those would be educational advice things that occur to me. And then as I was thinking about COVID, as we all are in the middle of this, or hopefully coming out of it, is that in a sense, COVID is our friend because it is freeing me of old habits of the way I thought everything had to be done. And as I rethink how to run programs, you know, okay, it doesn't have to be in person, it could be online, you know, that a lot of habits about trash, you know, that, oh yeah, in this you know, we have these 2 bins in the school and one gets recycled stuff and one doesn't, but people don't, they're in the habit of just putting everything in the one bin. But because we're rethinking how we do things, we can train people in new ways, new patterns, new habits of how to do things. So in that sense, COVID can be a friend in helping us find new ways to replace single-use plastics. And then the third, the M, is for move. And by move, of course, you want to exercise, you want to get out and do stuff. But I'm thinking of moving from the individual lifestyle changes that are good and important for all of us to make regarding the environment, to move to change our congregation, our faith communities, that because that's a group, and a group can be more powerful than just one individual. It multiplies the effort of an individual. And the final movement, you know, first the individual, myself, then the faith community, and finally using the power of the people in our congregations, our faith congregations, to influence the city, our country, the world. That this is systemic change. And this is what, you know, Citizens Climate Lobby, I know my husband is involved in that with Doug also, and they're doing the systemic change. But we all can do that. We all can sign petitions. We can all contact our Congress people. We can get involved in the systemic change. Where I'm planting some of my effort is with the city of Cincinnati, trying to promote the recovery of that plastic bag ban in especially grocery stores. It's a long haul. It keeps getting, the trash bag is getting trashed. But the idea of working to change not just my own personal behavior, but the system's behavior so that organizational change can happen. So that's it. Remember.
Thank you, Susan. And Pat, what is Mount Auburn doing? What advice would you give to everyone to get started after helping us to understand all you have accomplished? How do we begin? You're muted, Pat.
Mute. And maybe Claire makes that happen. I don't know. And I'm not used to doing Zoom on my phone instead of on my computer. So where I do think I know how to do it. Anyway, my advice, the most important thing I think that we did that has given us 10 years of vitality and movement in the directions we want to go is that we think of the leadership team for Earth Care as a facilitator for everyone in the congregation and every committee of the congregation. So we don't think, we organized in a way that would say, we are not a committee of the church where you can go join this committee and sit on the sidelines and do your work faithfully. We organized it in a way that every member of the leadership team is a leader on another committee, making sure that on their agenda is Earth Care and that they consider in all of their work together what the impact on the earth is. And that has meant that meant that so many of the things we could do could begin from the core group of people who could implement it. And that has worked, I think, for us really well. So I would really recommend that you think of the Earth Care team as a facilitating team that helps every member of the congregation and every committee of the congregation to be able to take some leadership, some initiatives for the earth. The second advice I think I would want to share is that in a church or congregation or a faith group, that I think our success, to the extent that we've had it, has been grounded in the fact that we communicate effectively with the congregation, with the pastor, and with the governing body. And know, I was the coordinator for 6, 7, 8 years. I'm not sure. And now I've retired. And we have a leadership team that crosses all of the activity of the church. And I think that it works because we've been faithful to the communication. And so that everybody has always felt like Earth Care is something that belongs to everyone. And that whether it's at church or in our homes, we are engaged in it. Some of the ways we've communicated very briefly, we communicate from the sanctuary on Sunday morning during worship. We communicate by my meeting with the pastor or other governing body members and other committees. And finally, especially during COVID, when we weren't meeting together except virtually, we created a e-magazine, and we invited members of the congregation to make contributions, and each month had a theme. It was usually 7, 8, 10 pages long with wonderful illustrations, with contributions from children and adults and friends of the church. And each time there was some organizing theme for the e-magazine. And it meant that, that during COVID, we were able to stay in touch with the members of our congregation and our friends.
Thank you, Pat. Anne?
Thank you. So, of course, as Doug and Joanne and everyone has been talking about, a lot of this is about finding your people and building your coalition within your congregation. And for our group specifically, we have an active religious school at our congregation that already kind of has a focus on social justice. And we found that a lot of the families involved in the religious school were really passionate about climate and the environment and really supported us taking on this initiative. So it's not to say that this concern is exclusive to younger people at all, but just that there was a strong level of support from those families. And I think that makes sense. I mean, a lot of us, including myself with children, I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, we're really concerned about this issue because, you know, we're worried every day about what is the state of the planet going to be for our kids when they grow up. So involving families, if you have a religious school in your congregation, is one important tip that I have. Another thing that I touched on earlier is to show people the connections between environmental issues and other issues they might care about. So even if people don't place the environment as one of their top priorities, that might relate to other things that they hold dear, like if they're concerned with refugee issues or food insecurity. There are all of these connections that you can show people to say that, you know, we are working on these issues through this one. And related as well to the core values of your congregation. I mean, even I think in our congregation, a lot of people were pretty savvy to this issue already, but not everyone is going to be. But if you can show them how it relates to values, they may be able to identify more. And another thing that we're working on doing in our team is to keep the congregation informed about what we're doing and to celebrate our successes. So that's starting to pique more people's interest and get more people involved. So one thing we've started doing recently is to give little updates at our from our social justice group at our adult education sessions, and that has gotten more people interested. And then my final little tip is to play to the strengths of the people on your team. So whatever people are passionate about, see if you can find ways to run with that and let them really take ownership of those projects. So right now we recently did a film discussion on the story of plastic, which is a really powerful film if you haven't seen it. And so we have some people really fired up right now about plastics, and we're going to see what we can do on that front.
All right, thank you, Anne. And representing Bellarmine, we now have Mac Johnson. Mac?
And what, could you remind me of the question?
Advice to those interested in forming a green team.
Yeah, so the part of what I want to say is adult formation. And I'm going to put in the chat an example of it. It's called Just Faith. There's a link to the website for that. We have organized this adult education and formation in small groups for many years. And it is a project that is small group, books and videos and discussions and experiences, and all in the context of prayerful commitment. And basically it is a way to spread the word about this by developing more leaders, okay? So we're a Jesuit parish. Society of Jesus is a missionary, order, that talks about being a fire that kindles other fires, okay? We talk of our Christian tradition as being, a leaven in the wider loaf of society, a salt of the earth, the light of the world, and so on. So it's sort of taking on the idea of community organizing within the wider community. And to do that, you need leaders. So we have a lot of people in our congregation, our parish, that have been through Just Faith formation. And it is a dynamic, expanding social movement. And it now has three, we're now doing their current 3 8-session modules, if you want to call them that, on climate. And reading books, having guest speakers, seeing videos, having discussions. And from doing that, cultivation of the soil, we have got a lot of fruit that's over time. And I want to suggest that thinking about the development of leaders is a dimension of this that can expand our influence of a green team. So it's sort of like the green team is an implementation, but you also need a lot of folks to appreciate what you're talking about. So adult education is a way to do that. And I'd be happy to answer questions about Just Faith, if any, now or later, if anybody's interested. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mac. And thank you to all of you for your excellent input. You certainly have given us a lot to think about. For our next section, Geneva Blackmore is going to coordinate the question and answer period. There were quite a number of questions that appeared in the chat box. So, Geneva?
Sure, thank you. The first question, I believe, is from Becca. Can you give a few key approaches that you have used to change your congregants' behaviors at home?
If you what?
A few key approaches. Yes, to change congregants' behaviors at home.
I could start it off by saying reduce your shopping of single-use plastics. And so avoid, in grocery shopping, try to avoid as many as you can. And the other thing is doing laundry, that I've found 2 products that are just like paper little, films that you put in the washing machine. They look sort of like a dryer, thing that people use, but it avoids the use of a liquid or a pod. And so those are things that people can do at their home.
Something we've done at Bellarmine is every month we have a green action in the bulletin. So like for November and December, it's using, if you're going to wrap presents, use reusable wrapping. If you're going to do cooking, try to not buy the shells, stuff with the shells. But just every month we've given them some kind of green action to do at home so they can get an idea. Or don't waste your food or whatever. So that's what we've kind of done, is every month we give them some kind of green action to do. So they're involved in something at home doing it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I would second the green action. So I mentioned, for example, food. We want people to eat less meat. Well, rather than lecturing them on eat less meat, let's make it fun and have cooking classes that are vegetarian. And we're having articles in our bulletin about that.
We had that, that gave me the idea. We've had a Go Vegetarian for Lent initiative over several years and provide people with recipes. But I love the idea of the cooking classes themselves, Joanne. And as Rita mentioned, we do the monthly green actions, but we also have a really extensive online resources. I'm not sure, we need to do more promotion to drive people to that, but it's got so many links, so much information of where they can make changes, how they can learn about the changes they can make, quizzes they can take to calculate their carbon footprint, and on and on. There's no end of resources that you can promote. You can use social media as well, which we do.
Has anyone talked tonight about recycling?
Little people have talked about it a little bit, yeah.
Well, I just was going to bring it up because what we started off, recycling was a key thing, and I didn't talk about it in the other initiatives, but we started collecting all kinds of things that we knew how to move forward. And then when the hub got organized in Lower Price Hill, we began, instead of collecting at the church, which we'd done for 4 or 5 years, and then we took it to the places that we knew could receive it. Now we encourage everybody to take everything that's on the list to the hub and to stay in touch with the website and to know what they need and what can happen there. And now we're really looking to including the hub in our mission budget, as well as to volunteer on Saturdays as a group. So I think that's another way we can engage people in the congregation to change their lives at home and in our work together.
So I'm going to make a plug. December 7th at 7 p.m. You'll see on our website that we have an event. So Colleen McSwiggan, who's the founder and director of the hub, will be explaining all about the hub at that next event. So come, learn about it. What they've already gotten 65 tons of material recycled just since, and they've only opened in April. So anyways, be sure to sign up and register for that next event, that December 7th.
And I think that's something that congregations can really promote for their members. And I would just echo what Pat said. And for those who are new at this, starting your own recycling effort can be a bit fraught. We have found some difficulty with this. We used to try to take e-waste from people and it became a bit of a nightmare. So referring people to the hub and rather than trying to do the recycling for them, I think is the best approach. And that, I love your idea, Pat, of supporting the hub financially and with volunteer hours, which they really need.
Anyone else have anything to add to approaches for that congregants can do at home? Anne, I think you had.
Yeah, I was just going to throw out there that we have used resources from Interfaith Power and Light. So they have some simple checklists and things that you can distribute, like the under $25, simple things that people can do at home. And then we created some displays around this and other environmental issues that are throughout our hallway of our education area, just to bring people's attention as they walk through that space. And we have like a little quiz they can take for carbon footprint, and a spot with postcards for writing your legislator and things like that. So.
I'd like to say one more thing. The part of our story as a Jesuit parish is conversation. It's the basis of community organizing, but it's also the St. Ignatius of Loyola was sort of a promoter of conversation. And one of the points of it is to find out what another person is motivated to do, what their call is, if you will. And so, because people will do what they, with some encouragement, what they feel called to do, what they are motivated to act on. And that's really the first asset in community organizing, is people's motivation to act. So having conversations about, well, what do you think? And what do you feel called to do? And what do you think we should do? And what kind of gifts do you bring to this party? Is a way to start new things. And I want to, you want to get formal about it, you can call it asset-based community development. You know, what people are interested in is the first asset and so on. But it's basic common sense too. And I want to just encourage conversation as like we're doing now, as something to intentionally do. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you for your input. The next question is for Pat. Could you give more information about the 8-month carbon neutrality class and the book that your congregation is planning to do?
Well, thanks for the question. And I don't have in Tennessee the notes with me, the outline for the course or the content. I did attend the course, and every month we had first a presentation by John Hancock, who was the professor for the course and is a member of our congregation and is an architect who's built a lead house and who led our work in the buildings renovations. The class participants, from 1 month to the next, they had an assignment to do for their own inventory of how they were going to reduce the carbon footprint of their family's household. And all the tools for doing that were made available during the class, and we learned to use them. The book, I was wishing even that I wasn't away and could have talked with John today to see where we are in the publication of the book, because I'm not sure. But all of the things we've been doing, and including the content for that class and for our retreat and other things, they're all on the Mount Auburn website. So if you go there, you can get more information about each of the things that I've talked about. And I think it's just Mount Auburn Presbyterian Church that I put in order to get on the website. But I'm sorry, I don't have that information, that address with me, though I don't think it's difficult to find it all. And I would also be, and other members of my committee would be happy to be in touch with anybody who's on the webinar tonight and has an interest in any particular program I've shared.
Thank you, Pat. I'm gonna put that link in the chat. I found it.
Thanks.
You're welcome. The next question is from John. Do you have advice for how to be good partners with nonprofits outside of your congregation who are focused on the environment and sustainability? Feel free to jump in, any of the panelists. It wasn't addressed to anyone specific.
This is Mac. I'll mention something. We are partnered with an organization called Co-op Cincinnati, which has 9 cooperatives at the moment. One of them is called Sustainergy. And Sustainergy is a worker-owned business which helps homes and businesses, for that matter, become more energy efficient. And they're also getting into solar energy development. I put their website in the chat. It is one of these, it's an example of what we were talking about earlier, you might call it energy integral ecology. Not only is it a green in the sense of, you know, promoting energy efficiency and solar, but it's also promoting community development, because in Cincinnati, we need to do that. There's a lot of poverty. This is a you know, poverty alleviation strategy, and it's sort of part of our integral ecology. So I want to commend Sustainergy and Co-op Cincinnati to your attention, and we can, you know, tell you what we've done with them if you're interested. Thanks.
That's interesting, Mac. I would also like to encourage anyone. Green Umbrella is the nonprofit that's really helping faith communities to move forward, and also has a number of other initiatives and good staff. One of the things we did during our Green Worship series was to invite the executive director from Green Umbrella to be our worship leader one Sunday morning. And it was a wonderful time together. And I think that there are other resources at Green Umbrella that could benefit all the congregations and all the faith communities.
Our church just recently started doing something where we use the church newsletter to write short articles about and advertise other environmental nonprofits. We just recently had an article about last mile food rescue in the newsletter. And it's another way of getting those other organizations' visibility up and setting a culture within our church.
I could add that Doug was one of the valuable resources that met with us early in our life together.
Thank you.
We have, you know, where it's locally, we have participants from Bellarmine on Faith Communities Go Green. I attend the meetings of, there's a XU climate work group, which consists of mostly a faculty and some students on the Xavier campus. And I attend their meetings just so I can report back to our Healthy Earth team what they're doing, since we're such a part of the campus, and we want to know what initiatives they're involved in and what students are involved in. And we also, there's a Archdiocese climate change, I forget, Care for Creation group. And one of our Healthy Earth team members tries to attend. So sometimes Rita does, sometimes someone else will attend those meetings too. And we report back as a way of staying in communication with other organizations that are working on these issues. Obviously there's many, and we can't attend, but there's also many that people can be encouraged to support financially to the best of their ability.
We've invited speakers. So a couple times a year, we have a speaker. For example, what comes to mind just is the Cincinnati Civic Garden Center has a wonderful program on composting. And so we got a speaker, and then we coordinated with Hamilton County Solid Waste District, and they were for a while selling at lower prices the compost bins. And so we set up a sale of compost bins at the JCC parking lot. And I mentioned that Rockdale's connected. And that was following the lesson from our speaker from the Civic Garden Center. I had mentioned that we're working with Sierra Club and other organizations, but bringing in a speaker from one of those organizations and then creating it into an action, we found very effective. And I got to tell you, I'm getting so many ideas listening here. This is just fabulous.
I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in again on this. Another thing we did, Rumpke you can take a tour of their recycling facility, and it's fascinating. And we had basically a senior citizens group and sponsored a tour of the recycling center, and then we all went out to lunch afterwards. And it was a lot of fun. It was fascinating. Once again, it's another way to, you know, get that momentum going. But if you've never gone on a tour, it's really worth it. It's absolutely interesting.
I realize we have not answered all of the questions, but we are out of time, and I am conscious that people have really participated beautifully. And this is not the only time we will do something like this. We will certainly follow up with this, and we will certainly make available the recording of this so that if you did miss some of it, or if you would like to share it with others. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank not only all of our panelists, but all of you for attending this webinar, and to assure you that Faith Communities Go Green will be available to assist you as you begin or continue your congregation's green team. Joanne mentioned earlier that she put in the chat the list of all of those congregations who had responded to our survey. If your congregation was not listed, please complete the 7-question survey. And remember, change doesn't happen in a silo. Faith Communities Go Green's mission is to partner with religious communities to create a more sustainable and equitable future for all by mobilizing the moral voice of our faith traditions to reduce the risk of catastrophic climate change. We would also like to invite you to our next Impact Team meeting if you would like to become more involved. And that will be this coming Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m. If you are interested in coming to that meeting, we would be happy to have you. Just put your email in the chat and say Zoom link, and we'll know what you mean, that you'd like the Zoom link for that. We also invite you to please continue following Faith Communities Go Green at www.greenumbrella.com/faith. And I think Joanne has just put that down there. Okay. And so I think we've heard some wonderful ideas tonight. It's like, I want to run out and start all of these. But we realize that we do this one step at a time. And people have shared how they got started. And then what happens once you do get started? And we've seen some wonderful things happening in all of these congregations. So thank you all very much for coming this evening. Please stay in touch with us. Continue to share what you are doing, because when we listen to each other, we learn an awful lot. So thank you and have a very blessed evening.